Greetings, everyone. Welcome back. If you're joining us for the first time, let me introduce everybody, or let them introduce themselves. Welcome to Ham Talk. My name is Sam KE0LMY, KE0LMY. This is Melissa.
Hi, Melissa, KI5ICQ.
This is Andrea.
Hello, Andrea Kilo 2 Echo Zulu K2EZ.
I love how she says her name. And this is Greg, of course.
N5XO, good day.
Because there was Greg, of course. All right, so we've got some great parts for you this month. Of course, I know some of you join us for all the technical stuff. I leave that to Andrea and Greg because that's their job. And Melissa and I handle more of the fun, exciting stuff that we think's fun and exciting anyway. So we've got a few different parts that we're doing this month. I know that my part centers on a follow-up to last month where I actually give the radiogram verbally so that you can understand the difference between writing it and reading it. Melissa, your part?
Oh, I'm going to have some pretty good questions this time.
And then Andrea?
I'll be talking with Anne KC9YL. She got into ham radio after thinking, oh, I'd never do ham radio. Not only got into ham radio, got into contesting, and decided to learn CW and operate CW. That's all.
And Greg?
I am going to be covering is your coax charging you a tax? Basically, we're going to be discussing losses in Feedline from your antenna. You know, a lot of people will focus on the radio, they'll focus on an antenna, and then they go and cheap out on the Feedline and kill everything. So we're going to discuss those issues.
So we want you to stay with us because we have a wonderful show planned for you, and we're really excited if you've come back to see us because you're slowly watching us become hopefully a little better at what we're doing, or if you're brand new, hey, welcome. We really enjoy having you here.
I agree with that. That's a good thing, and I think we're getting mildly better.
Absolutely. No,
I didn't pick on Greg.
I gotta take an issue with the.
Yeah, wait a minute. Some of our fans might be upset if I don't pick on him.
Oh, you can pick on
I don't know.
Greg.
I don't watch or read comment.
I'm just taking an issue.
I'm gonna pick on him. What, you're on a, look how special he is this month. He's on a stage. I mean, how much more special can you get when you put yourself on a stage?
You know, if I'd have thought about it, I'd have gotten that song that says, "Why everybody always picking on me?"
Oh, you know, yeah, poor Greg. Hey, Melissa.
Yeah.
Do you have any questions for us this month?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. Okay, so we have a question from Jennifer, and I'm just going to throw this out to anybody who might want to answer. So Jennifer says, my husband's brother and wife live over 175 miles away from us, and they, like us, are retired, and we want to be able to carry on a conversation on a daily basis, and they don't have quality cell phone coverage. So we all decided to get our ham licenses, but to talk that distance, we're told that we need to be on HF and have a general. Is that true? We're confused as to what license level we need and what kind of radios would be best. We love your show, and I really love the fact that it is mostly YLs, if that is the correct term.
Well, that's a good question. 175 miles is a challenging distance on VHF, and depending upon the circumstances may not be difficult, but it can be difficult. So let me run down a few scenarios. One, if there was a large mountain between that had a repeater and a common repeater, a rather simple equipment could possibly reach that repeater which would then extend the difference. But most repeaters in areas, unless you get into the mountains, only go maybe 40, 50-mile range from the center of the repeater. There are linked repeater systems with digital communications, DMR, that gets involved into the programming. What was that, Melissa? Sam?
Echolink.
Echolink. That was another means that you can link into a repeater. Since we talk a lot about weak signal 2 meters, 175 miles is a doable distance, but you would likely need to get an antenna maybe 30, 40, 50 feet above the ground. Really want to get it above tree level if you can. Some Yagi antennas, some power, and people who set up good stations like that can typically get those kind of distances on a day in and day out basis. But that is a little bit more advanced than your basic FM. HF, on the other hand, does require general class license other than 10 meters. And 10 meters probably would not work as well as 2 meter weak signal for that kind of distance, though it is possible. And on HF, particularly the lower frequency bands like 40 meters, 80 meters, those are good for local communications during the daytime, and they'll reach out that far without a problem. At nighttime, those will go even further, but usually one of those will work. So from a technological standpoint, in getting it to work, it is easier on HF than VHF, but there's a few ways that that problem or that goal can be achieved.
I'm going to add a little bit to that as well. On HF, 20 meters to really 10 meters, your ground wave's not going to be long enough. So that's not going to be doable with that. And your signal's going to hop right over the person you want to talk to. So you're not going to work them on HF. Now, like Andrea said, on 40, 60, 80, even 160 meters, that's going to work, but you're talking larger antennas. And during the daytime, 40 meters is not a bad band to work that distance, and 80. But the problem is at night, 80 becomes really crowded. I mean, the odds of doing our ranch for years, the only means we had to communicate, Ruth and I, back and forth was on 80 meters. And 1 out of 5 times we couldn't make the contact because of crowded bands. We just couldn't find each other.
Oh,
Mhm.
all right.
Yeah, I've had that problem a lot when I've gone on to 40 meters at night, especially around the times that there are special events or really big things like field day on. You got to watch that 40 and usually 20 and 40 during the day, 40 to 80 at night. So it's really difficult. You want to make sure that you're avoiding those times when the bands are going to be lit up for special events, contests, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Sam. You know, when there's a contest, that can just, a field day, forget any regular conversation outside those big contests. And of course, you know, that kind of communication is fully public. So everybody can hear what you're saying. So that always, it's not 100% substitution for a telephone.
Yeah.
Any of these bands, people can hear it.
One of the things I'll say, if it was Jennifer, correct? I will, if she'll send another email with where the 2 locations are, I can look at obstacles, because if there's not a big ridge line or something like that, 2 meter single sideband with a couple 100 watts will make that trip every single day, 175 miles without a problem. Where it'll become a problem is if there's some landscape issues, you know, like a big ridge line or something like that. It's still doable, but it's going to take a little bit more effort.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we'll hear from them. I
You're
have
such an optimist, Greg.
I like with signal 2 meters. I have faith in my abilities.
I want to point out during the last contest, you doubted that we could make a contact because there was a ridge in the way, and I said no problem, and we did make that contact with the ridge with my little antenna on my car.
That actually was pretty good. I admit I was wrong on that. I didn't think we'd make that contact up there. That was when you were up past Marble Falls, right? Because I've got a huge ridge line that goes up, and a lot of times I can't make a contact in that area. So we had something working for us that day.
Skill.
I admit when I am wrong. And according to my wife, that's daily.
Okay, are we ready for next question?
Sure.
Okay. Albert says, I've been watching your show now since episode number 2. I like the family atmosphere of the show, and you can see big improvements with the show each month. Keep up the great work. Based on this show and reaching the hamster website, I have ordered the IC 9700 from HRO. I am located in Columbus, Texas. My tower is just over 60 feet. What antenna would you recommend to allow me to work into San Antonio and join the net on Sunday evenings?
Coming out of Columbus, as Andrea said earlier, get your antenna over the treetops. If you can clear the treetops by about 10 to 15 feet, 13 to 17 element antenna would be perfect with 160 to 200 watts, and you'll be able to get into the net with no problem. There's a real good path between Houston and San Antonio. It's real easy to work that daily. So on 2 meter single sideband, you'll get into the net. Andrea does it out of the same region with a mobile. So, you know.
Yeah, my little puny mobile antenna.
Yeah. Yeah, 50-foot mobile antenna.
It's not 50 foot. It's only up 12 feet.
I didn't say height, I said length.
It's only 5 foot long, not 50.
Yeah. But I mean, you get into, I had no trouble copying you on the net last night.
Yeah.
Nice.
Okay, I have another question. Are we ready?
Yes,
Oh, yeah.
ma'am.
Okay, this one's kind of long, but I'll try and get through it. In episode number 4, Greg demonstrated how a long signal path that worked on SSB with good signal did not work at all when switching to FM. This demonstration, however, seemed lacking as the change from FM also included a change in radios and antennas. While Greg pointed out that his FM and presumed vertically polarized antenna was actually bigger than the horizontally polarized one used for SSB, no mention was made with regards to the other station's antenna, which could have been far inferior. Wouldn't it have been better for the demonstration to stay with the same exact hardware, frequency, polarization, and power settings at both ends and just switched modes on both rigs from SSB to FM?
That's actually a very good point, and I will take the criticism that I kind of was lacking in that that demo. But the setup, our antennas on both Dale KA5YEU for his sideband and for his FM are the same antennas, just flipped. He's got 2 sets. However, that is a good valid point, because in that demo, it could be misconstrued. What you're accomplishing by the mode could actually be just a horizontal antenna. So on this show, before I send it out, I will get with Dale and we will repeat that entire performance. And we will
And have a control in your scientific experiment.
That's right. We will stay on the same antenna and I will stay on the same radio. I rarely use my transverters for FM because I don't like the extra stress on my finals. But for this quick demo, we will do it. We did run the exact same power and distance. But yeah, I'll repeat that whole thing on this show this week.
Okay. Because they go on to say, wouldn't this have been a better true comparison of the effect of changing modes without all of the other variables? If a switch is made to vertically polarized antennas with different rigs, it would seem that the second setup with both SB and FM would further highlight the difference the mode makes and perhaps shown how much effect, if any, polarization contributed.
Yeah, I will do this. I have to switch radios because I've got vertical antennas on one set of radios, horizontal on the other, and my shack does not allow for quick change operations. Everything's built in, and got a lot of switches and everything in between. But I will do a vertical demo, single sideband FM, and a horizontal demo, vertical and FM. That's a very good question, Anna, and I appreciate it. And thanks for calling me out on it.
So Andrea, you have Anne coming on this month, right?
Yes, Anne KC9YL had a very good interview with Anne. And don't laugh at me, Greg.
See, it's not just me calling you out.
Anne was really interesting. She comes into the hobby as a no-code operator and goes places where long-timers like me kind of insist people wouldn't go. So let's go talk to Anne. Hello. Today we are speaking with Anne Dirkman KC9YL. She has been an amateur radio operator for 10 years. In the coming month will be her 10-year anniversary. Anne represents a experience much similar to the modern hams and what people coming into ham radio these days could possibly expect. Back in my day, we didn't have internet. We didn't have cell phones. So you couldn't go online and communicate around the world. Long distance phone calls were crazy expensive. So you just didn't communicate with people around the world like that. And amateur radio was a way of, some people came in the hobby as a utility almost to talk to people around the world, friends, keep in touch. Similarly, if you were in your car, you didn't have a way of staying connected with people or communicating, and there was a lot more downtime in your car. And amateur radio, particularly 2-meter mobile, was a great way of keeping in touch, talking with friends, family that may also be amateur radio operators. As the internet came into being and cell phones came into being, what people did with amateur radio has changed. And the reasons that people like me got into amateur radio, although myself, I was a teen, so it wasn't such a big role, but a lot of those old reasons were no longer the same. So I think what Anne has a very interesting story, which will resonate with the newer ham radio operators coming in. So having said that, Anne, and set a stage and a high bar for you here, I'd like to welcome you to Ham Talk. So welcome.
Okay, thank you, Andrea. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. And so let's start. How did you get into amateur radio?
Okay, what Andrea was being kind enough not to say was that I started out being rather old when I first got my license. So I didn't get into the hobby until I was 57 years old. I had been kind of toying around looking for a hobby that could pique my interest to going into my retirement years. And kids were out of college and I was going to have a little bit more money to not feel guilty about spending on myself. So was just kind of looking in that vein. In February of 2011, one of my good friends, Mike KE0LMY from Upper Michigan, had sent a post on Facebook saying that they were streaming live the audio from the repeater up there in the Marquette area of the UP 200 sled dog race. And there were volunteers manning all the checkpoint stations. And they were passing traffic back and forth, keeping track of the sled dogs and making sure that everybody stayed safe. And actually one team got lost. They got twisted up in a gravel pit and ended up calling for help, and they had to send out rescue snowmobiles. So that ended up being kind of a whole different thing. But meanwhile, I was chatting with Mike the next day on Facebook, and I said, oh, that was really very interesting. And he said, oh my gosh, Annie, said you should get your ham radio license. And I thought that that was the dumbest thing that anybody had ever told me. I didn't know anything about electronics. If I learned anything in high school, I certainly would have forgotten it by then. And I figured it was very big and expensive. I pictured, grandpa in the basement with all these crazy tubes and lights and things, and, taking up a lot of space. And he said, Anne, 9-year-olds can get their license. And he said, you can buy a radio that fits in your pocket and costs less than $100. So I realized that ham radio was something way different than what I had pictured. So I went to the high school where I worked at the district office the next day and picked up a copy of the book, Now You're Talking, and started reading that. And it talked about bouncing signals off of the moon and talking to the International Space Station. And I thought, what could be more cooler of a hobby than that? So I started testing for my license. I got an exam book and started going to the Aries Races meeting, which was the local club here. It was the only one that was active in the county, and kind of started picking their brains, and got my license in May of 2011. And I was licensed as technician, Kilo Charlie 9, Uniform Hotel.
That's very interesting, Anne. So in May 2011, you got your technician license, obviously. How difficult did you find it to be to pass that test?
It was probably difficult for me in the fact that all of the information was absolutely brand new to me, because I didn't have any kind of, technical experience, practical experience, didn't really know anybody. That the only person I knew that was a ham, I just knew he was a ham, and that was really all I knew about it. So didn't really know a lot about the hobby. And I wanted to learn as much as I could so that I could be a decent operator and not embarrass myself. So I went through that book from cover to cover, and I had heard that you can take your tech test after you've studied for about 10 hours. I probably logged about 100 hours of study because I just wanted to know everything. And I actually ended up acing the tech exam. So I was really pretty proud of that all my efforts were worth it. Plus, I knew that there was some upgrading of license at some point, something I might want to consider. So I knew that if I knew the basics really well, then that would help me as I progressed.
So that's cool. So as a non-technical person, you dove in, looked at the material, got to know it, and did well on the test. I also wanted to comment on something you were talking about, the sled dog race. And one of the things many years ago that was common, of course, was public service events where again, you didn't have cell phones. So for bike races, marathons, and stuff like that, amateur radio played a big part in the communications. We don't see that as much now because a lot of areas have cell phone coverage. But I think the sled dog race was probably in an area where they really didn't have cell phone coverage, and that's why the amateurs were recruited to help out. Would that be true?
Well, it would, and because you're in the middle of winter and it's cold and you're way up north, there's certainly the temperature is going to plague the problem. They were also checking the traffic, like vehicle traffic, to make sure that the sled dogs were safe to be able to cross the road and things like that too. So in that respect, it was traffic for, they were handling traffic on the radios, but it was for the vehicle traffic as well as for the sled dog teams, and just keeping track of them to make sure that they were, at that time, they weren't allowed to have any electronic devices with them. So that was another reason that if something did happen to them and they ended up in trouble, there was no way for them to be able to really contact anybody. So this way, the sled dog, the ham radio operators could know they got from one checkpoint, but didn't quite make the second checkpoint, so they could figure out where the teams were, which was how they ended up being having to rescue the one that got lost.
Yeah, makes some sense there. So you got your technician license in May of 2011. Where did you go from there? What was the first equipment that you got and your first experiences on the air?
Okay, I didn't buy a radio until I got my license. So I just went online on eBay and bought a little HT, a little off-brand for $35. So waited about 10 days for that to get here. And I would use it to check into the local Aries Races nets. And in order to do that, because I'm in kind of like a little hollow in my house here, I had to walk a mile up to the highway interchange to be able to hit the repeater. So I did that all summer until about October, November, and it started getting a little bit chilly here in Wisconsin. So one of the Aries members lent me a 2-meter rig and a J-pole, which worked pretty well. And then I bought an ICOM little dual bander mobile rig and put a bread pan down in or a broiler pan down in the basement with a mag mount antenna on that. And that worked pretty well too. And then after a couple of months, I bought some coax and moved the broiler pan up into the attic, and that worked even better.
First off, I got to comment, that's some dedication, walking a mile to check into a net. That's probably like walking like uphill both ways that mile. Anything you want to say quickly about the Aries net or the nets you checked in and your experience there?
Well, it's just at that point, that was really all that I knew that AM radio did. You just went to meetings. We have a nuclear plant in our county. So that was something that Aries group in particular focused on. We would have drills once a year. And I was able to do everything that I needed, check into the nets and participate in that drill just with the HT. So for me, that was what the hobby was at that point.
Okay. And so after that beginning, where did you go? Eventually, I know you upgraded and have got on got on HF. I want to talk a little bit about that.
In June then of that year, in 2011, I went to the Aries Races held field day at the Red Cross where they have their station set up. And I went and participated in that just as part of the club. And they were talking on bigger radios than what I had ever seen before. And there was one op that was operating an HF radio. And he actually had a script written down that said what to say and when to say it. And it took me about 2 hours to get enough guts to be able to make an air contact myself. And my first contact with someone from Michigan. And I thought, well, that's kind of cool. And then the second one was from Ohio. And I thought, well, that's kind of cool too. So then it's like, oh, I got a taste of HF on now. So then I knew that I was going to have to upgrade my license and end up investing in a little bit more different equipment than what I had.
So when did you upgrade and did you go to general and then extra?
Okay, I went and got my general then that fall in October and tried the test for amateur extra, and there was no way. It was looking like Greek on the pages. So I said, nope, we'll try that again later. I did have my 6 months later, I did have my amateur extra, but got the general license and bought an ICOM 735 from my former eye doctor and got that set up with G5RV Junior in the backyard and started working HF.
Cool. So in less than 2 years, you had upgraded. Actually, it sounded like maybe about a year from when you were first licensed till you had gotten your extra. Is that right?
About that, yeah.
Yeah. And then you got on HF based upon that experience. So what things on from that point on, what really excited you about amateur radio?
Well, it was just the first HF contact that I made on my station in my shack was to EA8BWL, a station in Canary Islands, which I thought was pretty darn exciting because I had to look up on a map to see what in the world, where that place was, because I had no idea. And basically I would just turn on the radio and just see if I could hear people. And then if I could hear people, then I would try to talk to them. And at that point, I really didn't understand that there were things like contests or anything kind of, organized events that were going on. I would just turn on the radio and spin the dial and just see who I could hear.
Cool. And certainly one of the things that I've noted about amateur radio operators who get on HF, they tend to know world geography a little bit better than the average person out there from looking at maps of all those prefixes they may hear on the air and places they make contacts, and hear of weird countries and places that nobody else seems to know. You mentioned contests. Did you get into contesting?
I did. There was a DX club that was local who happened to have several members that were in the Aries group, so they introduced me to that. And it turns out that the DXers tend to be big contesters too. So I found out that there was such a thing as QSO parties where you could contact people. And there was a Wisconsin QSO party that would have been coming up that spring in March. So I got on the air and tried to make as many contacts as I could. And I made 35, which was, for me, a pretty big deal. And thought, well, this is really pretty much fun. And at that point, I was starting to get kind of sick of my hand logging because I was logging everything by hand. And because I'm the person that I am, I would log everything on a scrap piece of paper and then copy it over into my real log so that it looked pretty. And that was getting pretty time consuming. So then I decided that I needed to start getting into some logging software. And then with that, I was able to participate in more events where you'd be making more contacts in a short amount of time. So the Wisconsin QSO party, of course, because I'm in Wisconsin, had the biggest draw for me because everybody wants to work Wisconsin when you're in your home QSO party.
Yeah, that's very true. And that's a good way for people to get on the air and be sort of the center of attention, because people are actually looking for contacts with people in your own state. I know similar events. One of the ones that I participated heavily in was the national parks on the air. And that got me in contact with a lot of people, and participating as an activator, that kind of put you at the center of attention there. Since I brought it up, were you active in national parks on the air as a chaser activator?
There really aren't any national parks here. So that was something it's just something that I haven't taken the time to do because there are just so many other aspects of radio that I'm doing that don't have time to do everything. I certainly found that out very early on. There's just so many directions that you can go in this hobby. And what I end up doing a lot of times is just kind of trying to scale back things because I'll see somebody operating something or hear about something and I'll go, wow, I could do that. And when I do that 14 times in 1 week, it's just impossible to do everything. So have to scale back my interests every once in a while. And but the focus changes. Also, I've noticed even just the operating modes and just different techniques that you want to use, or, contesting leads to DXing, which leads you into wanting to get different modes so that you can participate in both more fully. So that's something that I've also noticed in the hobby. It's just kind of always changing.
So with all the different things one can get into in ham radio, tell us about some of the big things that you found yourself getting involved in.
Well, I started out as a strictly sideband operator just because that was certainly the easiest thing for me to do, and enjoyed doing the contesting and the DXing that I did, which, was fine. At some point, it started getting annoying for my children because they didn't want me yapping downstairs in the basement till all hours of the night. So I was looking for something that would be a little bit quieter. And that was about the same time that I joined my contest club, the Society of Midwest Contesters, and wanted to be able to throw a couple extra points their way in some of the club competitions. So I figured RIDI would be a lot easier to learn than CW. So got set up for RIDI and got a little interface with the radio and the computer. And that really worked out really well. I really enjoyed that. I liked the fast pace of the contesting. It was a lot easier on my voice. And that was something that kind of kept me going there for a while.
And you didn't disturb other people in the house.
And I didn't wake other people up. Yes, I still like to have the radio up a little bit so I can hear that little warble. I just kind of enjoy that. So, but yeah, otherwise it was much more manageable and I could spend more hours on the radio too. Wasn't limited just like to the daytime hours.
It's amazing how, you got into the hobby in this one little area, and from thinking, oh, that's not even for me, and how it has grown on you a bunch. So you did mention CW, and I understand you did eventually decide to tackle CW, which many people, even when CW was required, were, they might have learned it as a necessary requirement, but would drop it thereafter. But you didn't have a CW requirement when you got your license, but you ended up getting into CW. And why was that?
Well, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because if there would have been a Morse code requirement at the beginning, I probably never would have even considered this. So I kind of came into the hobby at the right time. The CW requirement was being dropped, and the technology available was just booming. So it was just a good way to get into the hobby. I was on a net one night, on a Thursday night, just an Echolink net. And one of the gals who's in college actually was saying how she had taken CW classes, and she said it was
I'm sorry, Anne, to interrupt. Or you're not a cat, are you?
A what?
A cat? You look like a cat. Hold on. All right. Sorry about that, Anne. Just a little technical difficulty there. It happens sometimes. So we're talking about CW. I forget exactly where were we again?
Okay. I was on an Echolink net, and there was a gal who's in college, and she had just finished Morse code lessons, and she said that it was the best operating mode that she had ever seen, and that's all she ever wanted to do. So that was sort of intriguing to me. And part of the intrigue also was because I didn't have to learn how to do it. It might be fun just to learn it, just so that I could say that I did it. So I signed up for Morse code classes through CW Academy, through CW Ops, and went through level 1 and level 2 twice with 2 different instructors, and just really enjoyed it. I didn't think that I would enjoy it as much as I did. It's more challenging than I thought it was. I've heard people say that if you're musical, that it's easier for you to learn Morse code. I found it a little bit on the difficult side, but I got to where I was practicing about an hour every day, and eventually it kind of clicked enough where I could actually get on the air.
So when you mentioned level 1 and level 2, what does level 1 teach you, and where does it bring you versus, say, level 2?
The level 1 classes were basically to learn like the main 40 characters, the 26 alphabet, and the numbers, and several pro signs. So once you finished the level 1 class, you were expected to be able to know that much.
What kind of speed did they expect that at?
They didn't really have any terrible expectations. The part of the thing that they stressed was that the character speed should be around 20, so that you get to listen. You're used to hearing the sounds of the letters as a little short bite, and then eventually you'd squish those together, and it makes sense. Where if you'd be learning the letters at a very slow speed, then you start speeding those up and the letters sound differently. So that was one thing that they did stress was, as slow as you could go, space out the letters, space out the words, but get that character speed to be short, so that you just get used to hearing that, because that's how you're going to hear it on the air.
Right. It's certainly, it's important to your growth and speed. And what did level 2 bring you through?
Level 2 was to get used to like the actually on the air operating. There's QSOs, getting your letters together so that you form words. So just kind of like amping it up a little bit. Again, the QSO is the protocol for, who says what and who says when, and just to get a little bit more experience on the air. We did some practice sending as well, in both levels, where you would send back and forth, transmit and receive. We had practice and there were drills in both of those. So the CW Ops website has a wonderful source of student resources that's available to everybody. You don't have to be a member or even participating in the class, and that's free to anybody. And the group is run all by volunteers. Classes are all by volunteer, and there is no fee to join as well, but there is a waiting list. So if anybody has any inkling that they would like to start learning CW I would recommend that they get on the waiting list.
Very interesting. I assume you recommend CW Ops?
I do. For me, it was a good start because it was very structured. There were 2-hour-long classes throughout the week. We met on Zoom. There was one teacher that they call advisors, and sometimes they had an assistant, and there was maybe about 5 or 6 people in each class. So it was just a nice group setting where everybody got individual attention, but there was enough of you where there was kind of a little bit of forced peer pressure too. You always didn't want to be the worst person that week. So that was always kind of my goal, not to be the bad person. And you had assignments every week. There was a syllabus and there was expectations for you to study and, keep up with the class. So I benefited greatly from that structure because I just needed that.
Very interesting. How were the classes formatted? What were they online? Did you do on-air activity with the classes?
The classes were all, at that time, I think they were on Skype. I believe that they're now on Zoom, just partly because it's more popular and we had audio issues with the Skype. But yeah, you just met on Skype twice a week. And then I actually ended up with one of my classmates. We just kind of, both from Wisconsin, and just kind of had that mutualness. And he and I would get on Skype in between classes and study. And that was also helpful for me. Otherwise, you just studied on your own. There are a lot of audio tapes, MP3s that are available on the website. And then they would direct us to those. And that's what you would just study, mostly listening was that. And then when we were in classes, then we were also transmit.
And how many people would be in a given class?
Usually about 5 or 6 were the classes that I had. There was one instructor with an assistant once in a while, or that was like a advisor in training. And then there were usually about 5 or 6 people in the class. So it was just a nice group, lots of personal attention.
Cool. Yeah, I could see at that size, you get plenty of personal attention. How did you feel getting actually on the air and operating CW the first times?
Well, at first I was just contesting and, short QSO parties, things like that, where 5'9" Wisconsin was all I had to say. And I've got 3 little presets on my radio here. So I would just hit the button that would say KC9YL, KC9YL, in CW. And then I had another button for the exchange. And then I didn't really do any hand sending at first when I first started contesting. And eventually, once I started, practicing a little bit more on my own and getting a little bit more confidence after I started, then I started doing some hand sending. And my New Year's resolution in 2019 was that all my CW from then on was going to be hand sent, and I have kept up with that. So now if I'm on the radio and I'm on CW, that's all sending by hand.
How long has it been since you completed the last CW Ops?
I probably finished up, I think, in 2018. And again, like I said, I was retiring, doing an hour of practice every day, and my brain was just fried by the time that last class was done, just because I had so much going on in my life. So kind of took a little hiatus, and last year would get on the air a little bit here and there, but not as much as I would have liked. Excuse me. And last spring, I discovered a group called the Long Island CW Club. And found out that they had classes for YLs, which I thought was kind of appealing, but their big draw at that time was they were teaching classes to youth because of the COVID shutdown. And they were, running these classes for young people and school-age children. And I thought, well, that was kind of a nice mission for them. So I checked into the group and became a member. There's a fee for that. Took out a lifetime membership for that just because I considered it more of a donation than anything else. And I thought, well, if I get some good out of this club, then, so be it. And they're right now up to about 70 classes per week that they teach of all levels. They still teach the kids classes. Their beginning classes are B1 and B2, which would be kind of similar to what the CW Ops classes would be. It's not quite as structured as the CW Ops, which is kind of why I like it, because you can pop in and out to a class as you will. I was at one time taking 4 classes through them and 2 intermediate classes of varying levels. And then there's a head copy class on Tuesday night, which is still my all-time favorite. And then there was a QRQ for high speed class, which I had checked into for a while and was enjoying that, and ended up with some unexpected surgery early this year. So then I kind of backed off of that. And also in the meantime, I kind of realized that for me to really get better, I needed to get on the air more. So that's something that I have made a point of doing. And there's a K1USN event, just an hour long on Mondays or Sunday nights and Fridays. And it's a slow speed, it's contest format, but it's less than 20 words per minute. And I've been being pretty religious about doing that every week. And then on Wednesdays, there's a CWTs, which is put on by CW Academy, CW Ops. And that's high speed. Those people are really banging out the contacts. So I wanted to do something that was challenging, and that certainly has been challenging. So enjoying the combination of both of those.
Wow. So just kind of curious, at this point in your amateur radio career, if we want to call it that, how much of your time do you spend on CW versus other modes?
I have been spending pretty much all my time on CW, except for the local nets, which is something that I never would have thought that I would hear myself say. The local nets, there's a couple Echolink nets that I'm on every week, probably about 5 or 6 hours worth of nets throughout the week. But pretty much all my operating is CW. I can't remember the last time I used my microphone. In fact, it's unplugged right now. It's just a challenge, and I know for me to get better, I need to practice more and I need to do it more. And I can see progress that I've been making, which is very heartening for me to actually be able to see progress.
That's great. And you say it takes practice and stuff. Are you enjoying this?
That's how I'm going to get better. And it's fun. My goal was to make 10 contacts for each session. Excuse me. And I think last week I had 16. So it's something that I can tell I'm getting a little bit better at, willing to spend more time on it, which is always a good sign. If there's an event like tonight, there's going to be the K1USN, and I'm already looking forward to that. I'll be able to get on the radio for another hour. And the sideband contests don't hold much joy for me anymore. A lot of omens hollering at each other just kind of gets to you. While I've got a hearing impairment as well. So, that just kind of is overwhelming at times, where the CW, it's like, what it's going to sound like, and you can crank your radio way down so that, you got to be able to hear it, but it's just not that head banging in the ears all the time where some of those sideband contests are. And you need to be a little bit more polite, I think, too, in CW, because you can't hear everybody at once. So
I do find your journey amazing, Anne, from thinking ham radio, no way, to getting into it, and then now focusing on CW, that a lot of people think that that's only for those old timers that had to learn it. But what we're seeing is a new generation of CW ops as evidenced by the demand for the CW Ops classes and that the Long Island
Island CW Club, right?
Right. And do you recommend them for beginner CW Ops as well?
Beginning classes are B1 and B2, and they have them taught by several instructors throughout the week, various times throughout the day and evening. And then the classes will rotate. They'll usually do, I think, about 6 or 8 weeks of a class, and then they'll reset. And the one nice thing about these classes too is you can jump in and jump out. And if you find a class that's a little bit too easy for you, you can easily find something that's a little more challenging. And if, the reverse is true, if you're in something that's just a little bit too much for you, you can stay in that class if you want, or you can back it down and pop into a different class, where the CW Ops is, you're in the class and you're in there for 8 weeks. So it's just, they're both a mix to each other. There's quite a few people who I know that are, in both. They're taking the CW Academy classes and the Long Island CW classes. And for, quite a few people, it's a nice mix. There's several instructors in the Long Island CW group that are also instructors in CW Ops classes. So it's just kind of a nice intermingling between the two. They really work well together.
Okay, that sounds interesting. So somebody wanting to get in CW's got a couple options. They can have less structure, or if you're somebody that needs more structure, you've got CW Ops that is more structured. Before we get going here today, do you have any advice, suggestions for the new operator or somebody looking to get into amateur radio?
One thing I'd like to remind people is just to remember that it's only a hobby, and there's other things in life and sometimes get in the way of your operating or your contesting. And the one nice thing about ham radio is you can just kind of put it on the shelf for 6 months if you have to, and you can come back to it and it's going to be right the way you left it. The technology, the advancing of the hobby, how it's changed just in the past 10 years that I've been a ham is just amazing. One of the reasons I wanted to get into ham radio was kind of to step away from the computer. And I use the computer now more than I ever did with the logging software and the digital modes. And that's something that's gotten to be a big deal. It's really important, I think, to also give back to the hobby. And there's so many ways to do that. People, you don't have to be an Elmer to be necessarily putting somebody's radio together or climbing up their towers for the antenna. There's other ways that you can really help grow the hobby. Joining clubs, I think, is a real good idea. Joining clubs for different reasons, because I've got some special event clubs. There are some clubs that I belong to that only do a particular special event. Some focus on public service, some focus on DXing, some are on contesting. So make sure you find a club that suits your needs. That's something that I think is really important. And even giving back to the hobby, whether it's, sending scholarship money towards a club that you belong to, or giving them a couple bucks for their repeater to maintain their equipment, just things like that. You don't necessarily have to be tech savvy and be able to fix things or repair things or build things. You can still contribute.
Okay, Anne. Well, thank you very much for coming on the Ham Talk. Those are all great points you bring up. And again, appreciate you taking the time out of your day to come and spend some time with us.
All right. Thank you. Thanks so much for inviting me. Glad it worked out.
Thanks, Anne. Bye-bye. This is Kilo 2 Echo Zulu, roving reporter for Ham Talk.
I'm really glad that you got a chance to talk to Anne. We learned some amazing things about her. I hope that I can do at least half the things that she's accomplished. I know CW is a huge weakness of mine, so thank you so much for having her on and interviewing her. I appreciate it. And Greg, I guess we'll go on to your part.
All right. Well, we're going to talk about Feedline losses and how to get your station up. So let's roll that film. Okay, I am going to be covering this segment and the next 3 or 4 segments of Ham Talk, with the topic being how to improve your VHF UHF station. Or in this episode, it's is your coax charging you a tax? So let's go ahead and get started with that. First and foremost, the old saying, the ham with a $10,000 radio and a $10 antenna has a $10 ham station. The in reverse, the ham that has a $10,000 antenna and a $10 radio has a $10,000 ham station. Far too often we get caught up in fancy radio, flashy, lots of lights and buttons and knobs. And that's not the important part. Yes, having a good quality transmitter and receiver is going to making communications much better, but it all starts with the antenna system, and the story continues or ends with your feed line. I can't stress how important feed line and feed line loss is. We're going to go ahead and I'm going to be putting up on the screen here some calculations to give you as an example, and we'll be going over them. I'm picking a few of the most common type of feed line, coax and hardline, and using this as an example to just show you how dramatically hardline can be impacted by, or not hardline, I'm sorry, your station can be impacted by the quality of your feed line. Okay, let's go ahead and we'll pick a couple of the common ones. We'll start with RG8X. All right, we're going to make the following assumptions for all of these demonstrations that we're doing. The feed line length is 100 feet. The frequency is 144 megahertz. Our SWR is 1.5 to 1. And our radio output is 100 watts. All right. So if we do the calculation on RG8X, what we're looking at is a matched loss of 4.052 dB. All right. And an SWR loss of 0.15, followed by a total loss of 4.202 dB. All right. Now, let's put that number in perspective, because that sounds like a low number. And you say, ah, no big deal. Wrong. 3 dB is 1/2 of your power, or worse, 1/2 of your reception lost. Okay. It's just gone. You ain't getting it back. Now, on the transmit output, you can overcome that by putting in more wattage, you know. And we have a couple of local hams that I won't mention names or calls, but they put their call out all day long, and they're running high loss cable, and they overcompensate with a lot of power. I think one of them's running like 400 watts of power on 2 meters. The problem is people hear him. He puts his call out. 50% of that 400 watts is getting there. So he's hitting the antennas with 200 watts, but he can't hear anybody. I hear people every single day coming back to him that he can't hear or he can't work properly because he's losing all the signal in the coax. So back to our example, we're looking at this match loss of 4.202. So our total power output, remember we put 100 watts into the coax. At the antenna, we're only seeing 37.9 watts of power. So that's a 62% loss of our transmit power. By the same token, that's a 62% loss on our reception power. Okay. And I've also included in here, I'm not going to go over it. You can pause the video and stuff to take a look at it. But I added the antenna gain figures and everything. So we'll real quick touch base on this one, and we'll touch base on the last one just for comparisons. But with a good high gain antenna, 12 dB or more, and if you're running omnidirectional, you're not getting anywhere near that. This is assuming a Yagi. Your effective power out of 38 watts at the antenna is becoming an ERP of 602 watts. Now you're going to quickly watch how quick that changes as we go up. Let's go to the next most common feed line cable. and that is RG213U. Okay, again, the same specs and parameters, but now our match loss is 2.59 dB. SWR loss is 0.124. And I want to touch on something on that. Here's another thing. I had a ham, his station could not, I mean, his signal going out was bad, but it wasn't as bad as his receive. He was the most deaf station I've ever met. And he kept saying, my SWR is perfect. It's 1.1 to 1. Well, I got over there and we put a analyzer on it and started reading, and he had 1.9 to 1. I'm amazed his finals survived. Why was his SWR meter reading low? Because the more loss you've got, the more loss you have in your return SWRs. All right. So, you know, you may have 10 watts coming back in on the antenna in the form of your SWR, but that's reduced now by 50% or 62% in that other case. So you're seeing low SWRs when the reality is not. So that's another thing to keep in mind. Okay. So on RG8, we're looking, or I'm sorry, the RG213U, we're looking at a much better setup. We've got 2.59 dB. We've got an SWR loss of 0.124 for a total loss of 2.714 dB. Our power output of the 100 watts is now up to 53, so we're getting there. And we're looking at a 46% loss, okay? Neither one of these two coaxes that I just used as an example should ever be used on VHF, UHF, especially by anybody that wants to do more than work a repeater. If you're just working neighborhood repeaters, that's fine. But if you want to do simplex, whether it's FM simplex on 2 meters, or you want to get into weak signal operating on single sideband, Feedline loss is critical, and you need to really start paying attention to it and reduce that. Let's go ahead and jump up to LMR 400. This is the most common coax that people use when they're starting to understand coax loss and its impact on their station. All right. With the same parameters, we're now looking at a 1.4 dB loss, an SWR loss of 0.089, and a total loss of 1.57 dB. So we're coming way down, but we're going to see the results on that. Now, of that 100 watts, 69.5 of it is making it to the antenna. And we're only down to 30% loss. So LMR 400 and LMR 600 are excellent choices to hams on a relatively good tight budget and still want some flexibility in regular coax. They're just not comfortable with hardline or anything. Let's show an example. Remember that the ERP we had on the first antenna of what, I think 600 watts? Now we're up to 1102. So you can see your signals coming up, and you're putting out a much stronger signal on there just by changing the feed line. Now, keep this in mind the other way. You're only losing 30% of your incoming reception. So you're not going to be with good quality LMR 400 or 600, which is real close to half-inch hardline in losses. You've just improved dramatically your station quality. And if your runs are over 100 feet, you're really improving the quality. All right. The next level that most people want to jump to, and the most common in the hardline, is half-inch hardline. And you can pick up half-inch hardline, 100-foot rolls, 200-foot rolls all day long at almost every swap meet and ham fest. So here we are using, again, the same parameters with half-inch hardline. All right. Our loss now is, match loss is now down to 0.79. We're at that magic where my station is always limited to 1 dB max loss. Okay. So That's my goal. I don't care what band, what frequency I'm on. I always set a goal of max of 1 dB loss. Okay. Our SWR loss is 0.056. Total loss is 0.855. So everything is down below. And our power out from our 100 watts is now hitting the antennas at 82.1 watts for a percentage of 18% loss on that. So again, you can see, look how dramatic we've just changed everything by going up and taking the first step on the Heliax line with 1/2-inch hardline. And now our effective radiated power is up to 1301 watts. So we're improving our station, and we're no longer necessarily a alligator. Still possible to become an alligator because you still can outpower your station. And that's another topic we'll be covering, is knowing how much power to run, that you're hearing everybody that can hear you. All right. And then the last one, this is not as common for most stations. Now, in my personal station, we actually go all the way up to 2 1/4 inch hardline. And that's because of the fact that I am up in the 23 centimeter range, and losses go up really high at that range. And I'll do a demo of that maybe next week or next month's show. But on 7/8 inch hardline, again, the same exact parameters, our match loss is now down to 0.43. So we are way down. And I'll explain why getting way down is important here in just a second. Okay. So our SWR loss is 0.033. Our total loss is 0.472. And we're now seeing 89.6 watts out, and we have a 10% loss. And our ERP is now up to 1421 watts output. So you can see the gain. So let's address that. Without running any major power, we've just almost doubled our signal output. Well, actually, we've more than doubled our signal output. Well, actually, let's just go back to the 1/2-inch hardline for the example here, okay? Because that's more realistic for everybody. So we're at the 1/2-inch. So we've cut our loss dramatically. We're way down below the 1 dB loss limit, and we have more than doubled our effective radiated power, and we've more than doubled our regular output, the solid RF going to the antenna. By the same token, we have increased the reception that we're getting. So now we can hear and talk to all the stations that's there. So that gives you a quick example of just how much coax and feedline can impact your station. It's dramatic. And as you go up in frequency and up in power, that gets even more dramatic. One of the things, remember, is as you start heating that hardline up, you're burning more power, you're changing the dielectric, you're shortening the life of your connectors, you're shortening the life of the coax or hardline and everything from heat. You dump 500 to 1,000 watts of power into high loss coax, and you're changing that all into heat, and that heat is going to dramatically shorten the life of a lot of devices in your shack. It's going to impact your connectors, your feed line. It's going to impact the any relay switches and switches that you have in line. One other area, and I'll be touching on it in greater detail in future episodes, but keep in mind, everything you put on that hardline is lost too. My personal opinion, and I will not allow them in a shack. I have actually gone out of my way and ordered and changed connectors on radios and amplifiers and everything On 2 meters and up, I do not allow UHF connectors in my shack. They're lossy and they cause an impedance bump and will change your impedance going up. So instead of your radio seeing 50 ohms, it could see anywhere from 42 to 63. So you want to keep that in mind. Every connector, especially UHF connectors, is adding loss to the cable. So you've got to keep those in mind as you go up. Surge protectors, relay boxes, amplifiers, every single connection, watt meter is adding insertion loss and it's adding connector loss. So if you're like most serious shacks, I mean, mine included, I come out of the radio, so there's a connector. I go into the amplifier, so there's 2 more connectors. We're now up to 3. We then come out and go into a SWR watt meter that's permanently attached. Then we go through the relay box at the top of the tower. Then we go through the surge protector, and then we go into the antenna. That's a lot of connectors. And with all those connectors is loss. End connectors and quality end connectors will dramatically remove that loss from your station on there. So, you know, keep that in mind. And also keep in mind, you can go and pick up connectors all day long. I see them at swap meets, ham stores, and everything for $3, $4 for a UHF connector or even end connectors and stuff. You get what you pay for. All the connectors in my shack are about $25 a piece, which adds up. And I understand that, you know, that's not always part of the budget plan, but it quickly adds up. And then, but, you know, at the end, does it really make sense to turn around and spend, say, $300 on 7/8 hardline, then cheap out on all your jumper cables and everything? Just to give you an idea on my shack, HF 160 through 10 meters is all on 1/2-inch hardline with UHF connectors for HF. And my jumpers that go from the hardline to the antenna, because I have big Yaggies, I've got a log periodic for HF, is LMR 213 for the jumper. It's about a 20-foot run, comes off the hard line at the top of the tower and provides my rotor loop and into the antenna. On 6 meter, I run 1/2-inch hard line and LMR 600 Ultraflex for the jumper loop. On 2 meters, 220 and 430, or no, 2 meters and 1.25, 220. I am running 7/8 inch hardline and LMR 600 Ultraflex for the jumper loop. On 432, 900, I am running inch and 5/8 hardline and LMR 600 jumpers for the rotor loop. And then on 23 centimeters, I am running 2 1/4 inch hardline with LMR 600 Ultraflex jumpers again on there. And I'm running all high quality end connectors on everything. So it keeps my losses down. And I've got a loss production chart that I will put up at the next month. I'll provide the video. And I'll also post it online as an example showing my total losses, connectors and everything, all the way back to the shack for each band. All right, well, I hope that was informative. I hope it gives you an understanding of just how valuable your hard line or your feed line is to your antenna system. It does you no good to put a 17 element high gain Yagi at the top of a 100-foot tower if you burn all your signal up coming and going. Okay. And on transmit, yes, you can overcome with power. But again, like I said in the example of some local guys I hear, you're going to rapidly become an alligator. People will hear you, but you're not going to hear them. You can respond with that by putting in a preamp up at the top of the tower And that'll work and that'll overcome and help you return. But that's a pretty pricey project because you're not just looking at a preamp. You're looking at a preamp, and a quality preamp going to run you $700-800. Then you got to buy a sequencer for a couple $100. Then you've got to get all the cable and wiring, and the complexity of the station just went up dramatically. And I do run preamps on multiple bands, and they have their place. But using them to overcome bad Feedline is just, it's poor mathematics. All right, well, back to the group. Thank you, and we'll see you again next month.
Okay, now I think I actually have that problem at my house right now, because I'm not even gonna talk about the loss at my house, so.
You know about the Feedline?
Yeah, we don't even have a good Feedline. We won't even talk about it.
It's amazing how Feedline gets very close to tax rates, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. All right, and I guess finally that would leave me. So like I said in the introduction, I will verbally give you guys how you pass a radiogram. I know there are parts of our audience who aren't interested in emergency communications. Just, skip to the next video now. I'm just kidding. All right, so for my part, the radiogram is actually one of the best things that we use, and the Benton County Aries has actually started doing a training radiogram every single week that we do our weekly net. And if you guys are interested, thanks to the conversation about Echolink earlier, we actually have Echolink on the Warsaw repeater in Warsaw, Missouri. So Sunday nights at 7 p.m. on the WB0EM-L or TAC-L repeater, you can join us for our weekly net, and you can also get training on radiograms at that time. So without further ado, here's my video.
We're going to do a little bit of a follow-up to something that I did last month for Ham Talk, which was talk a little bit more about the radiogram. This month, though, I'm going to show you what it sounds like when you actually pass the traffic over the radio. We've had a ton of questions. I get them normally at the Benton County Aries website and on my Facebook page, or the Benton County Aries Facebook page, over how do you actually verbally say the things in a radiogram. Kind of like if there's a question mark, you say query, things like that. So what I'm going to do is I've created a little radiogram here. I know it's really bright coming at me, so you guys can't actually see. There you go. And I'm going to read it to you as I would give this traffic if I were passing it, say, on the Missouri Traffic Net or anything like that. All right. So the first line that you cover, like we said last month, is this whole top line right here. And that whole top line has some very important information. And it has things like the number of the message that you're passing. It has the precedence. It has the delivery method. It has the station of origin. That's always you. It has the place of origin and the check. The check is the number of words in the message. The place of origin is where your boots are physically located. It doesn't matter where you got your ham license or where your home QTH is. This is where your boots are when you pass the message. All right, and then of course it has the time filed and the date. But you'll hear all that when I get ready to say it. What I'll do is I'll go ahead and do it now, and then I'll talk a little bit more about it afterwards so that you can see why we say things the way that we do. All right. I'll give you just a minute. If you'd like to get a pen and a piece of paper, you can write down exactly what I say. That way you can see how it is. And actually, if you go to the BentonCountyAries.org website, then you will find on the quick reference guide a place where you can print out the radiogram. You can also print out the ICS 213 and things like that, but you can print that out. I'll give you guys just a minute, or you can pause the video. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and give the radiogram as if you were on the other side of the radio talking to me and I needed to pass this traffic to you. Ready? All right. Please copy my number 8, precedence, routine. HX is golf. Station of origin, Kilo Echo 0, Lima Mike Yankee. Check 19, I repeat numerals 19. Place of origin, Camdenton, I spell CAMDENTON. Current time and date. 2, interested amateur radio operators. Break for text. Passing traffic using an ARRL radiogram is easy. Period. Just remember to, I spell T-O, read it slowly over the air. Period. Break for signature. Signed, Sam KE0LMY, KE0LMY. Okay, so you'll notice there was a couple of things that you'll pick up if you look through the guide on how you say or spell things when you are giving a radiogram. The first thing that you'll notice is that when you're going to give a number versus a word that could be a number like 2 or TO, you'll want to either say numeral 2, or you want to say I spell TO or TOO, whichever the case may be. So if you need to spell a word that has many spellings or it isn't very common, people may not have come across it before, like Camdenton, for example, you'll want to spell it out. If you have things like punctuation, now I said period, but there are many other ways that you could say that so that people know that you're at the end of your sentence. If you go to our BentonCountyAries.org website and you click on Quick Reference Guide, you'll see an entire breakdown. There are links to take you to different places on the ARRL website, which will show you things like what the HX is and why we choose golf. A little secret, we choose golf because if you aren't able to pass the message, you don't have to report back to the people that you didn't pass the message. There are a few different precedences, like we said last time. Most of the ones that you will pass are going to be routine. So that makes it really easy when you have to remember something like that. Now, if you have any questions after this, you can feel free to get in contact with me, leave a message in the down below, or leave a message on the email for the Ham Talk, and one of the people on Ham Talk, usually Melissa, will let us know if we have any questions. I really like, taking the time to let you guys know the things that I've learned, and I started out a little quick. I still do it until I catch myself and say, hold on a second, I've got to slow down. You definitely want to remember to give your radiogram slowly, because people can't write quickly, especially in high stress environments, like if you're doing emergency service communications. So just go slow and remember that not everybody may be as speedy as you, or they may need you to repeat yourself. Now, the point where I would have asked you, or you could have told me if you needed any fills, was right before when I broke for signature. I could have asked, any fills needed? And then at that point, if you feel like you missed any part of the message, you can say, yes, please repeat from, and then you'll give me where you left off or where you think you missed something. And then I would go back and repeat that to you. So hopefully this was helpful to you. I had a hard time finding an Elmer who would teach me the proper way to actually physically say the radiogram over the radio. So I have to give a huge shout out to Linda. She's here in Missouri. She's on the Missouri Traffic Net. Mike X-Ray Foxtrot, last 3 of her call. She's fantastic. I don't want to give it all just in case she doesn't want to be on the show, but she may not want to be YouTube famous. But she was absolutely fantastic when I asked her how to physically say a radiogram as opposed to how you write it, because it looks a little different when you write it than when you actually read it. So thank you guys for joining me. I really appreciate it.
We hope that you guys were entertained and enjoyed this episode. We want to thank our sponsors, the Hamsters Weak Signal Group. Without their support, I don't think that we could get this show up off the ground. Greg does an amazing job every month. He edits all of the videos, so a huge hand to him. We give him a little bit of a hard time, but you know what? Sometimes he deserves it. So thank you so much for joining us. We hope to see you next month. And remember, look down in the description below for any of the website links and information from this month's episode. Thanks for joining us in 73.
73s. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.